In the first Fear and Hunger game, we explore the eponymous Dungeons of Fear and Hunger, a location within the Kingdom of Rondon. Each of the 4 playable characters have a personal reason to be here, all centered around the character, Lagarde, whether it be to rescue him or get revenge against him. Yet these dungeons are far from ordinary, a fact that becomes apparent as soon as we enter the dark confines of its halls. Our hunger is unnaturally sapped, and our sanity is drained at an alarming rate. This is not to mention the abominations that await us inside the dungeon, from mutated guards to a horrifying crow-headed monster that stalks us all throughout the prison. The bizarre sights we see throughout our journey leaves us with many questions. For example, where did this Crow Mauler come from, and who is he? And why do the dungeons unnaturally sap our sanity? The answer to both these questions is that these dungeons are heavily under the influence of an old god that lies deep beneath its floors, the old god known as the God of the Depths. These dungeons are not just mere brick and mortar, but are essentially part of this god, the labyrinthian corridors akin to its intestines, and from the moment we step through the doors, we are subject to the God of the Depths power. The God of the Depths, in many ways, is the main antagonist of the first game, but is not overtly stated to be so. Instead, it is a character that is rarely mentioned or directly acknowledged. But when you peel back the layers of this game's story, you begin to realize that all of the events we witness are being shaped by this ancient god. Additionally, these dungeons are an important nexus, as they sit above the entrance to the city of the gods itself, and thus the influence of the old gods is incredibly strong here. All of these influencing factors result in the unique blend of otherworldliness that one can experience within the Dungeons of Fear and Hunger. The Crow Mauler is one of my favourite characters in any game, and to make sense of this character, we have to understand what is happening with the dungeons. In doing so, we might get an answer as to how an honourable captain was transformed into this crow-headed beast. In this lore video, we will be discussing both the Dungeons of Fear and Hunger, and the God of the Depths, as one cannot talk about one without discussing the other. And if you are interested in additional benefits, such as exclusive videos and early access to videos like this one, then check out my Patreon in the description below. So with that said, let us dive deep into the lore of Fear and Hunger. We know this location as the Dungeons of Fear and Hunger, and in the conventional sense it is a location used by the Kingdom of Rondon as a prison. But unconventionally, the dungeons have been co-opted by the god that lives deep beneath them, the God of the Depths. When we speak to Ragnvaldr about the dungeons and this god, he tells us that the interior halls of the dungeon are the god's intestines. Additionally, he says that the god is the one responsible for the form the dungeons take, that the layout changes in order to challenge those who enter, and this can explain why we can get different layouts or seeds for each of the areas. It is important to understand that as soon as we enter the dungeons, we are entering the body of the God of Depths. This place has long been an important location throughout history, with Rondon's dungeon just being the latest layer of stratigraphy. Indeed, evidence of prior civilizations having built on this location is seen when we get to the main prison floor, and we find the statues of the lizardmen, the race of reptiles who existed before humanity. When we visit the Hall of the New Gods, we can ask them about the dungeons and they say the following. The Dungeons of Fear and Hunger are ancient, almost as old as this city. They have seen many different ages. They have always worked as a nexus between multiple different planes of existence. In the current era, the Kingdom of Rondon built prison sections over the ancient tombs. They most likely tried to use the nightmarish rumours about the tombs to their own advantage, but little did they know that such darkness could not be contained. The dungeons are built upon the ancient tomb of the gods, which in turn leads to the fabled city of the gods, Mahabre. But most importantly, the dungeons are located right above the old God of the Depths. This is the darkness to which the new gods are referring. The new god suggests that Rondon knew that this area was supernatural, and purposefully built the dungeons here because of it. When we enter the dungeons, the dark influence of the god of the depths is what causes us to feel unnatural hunger, and it is what leads us to have our sanity drained. It is this element that the authorities seemingly wanted to exploit, so that the fear and sanity of the prisoners would be drained even faster. So it seems as though the dungeons are called the Dungeons of Fear and Hunger, because the authorities were aware of the unnatural forces at work here that caused fear and hunger. They sought to exploit the miasma in this area for their own dungeon, so that their prisoners would feel more intense fear and hunger, and thus would be easier to break. The new gods also mention that the tombs have long been here, and I presume this to be a reference to the tomb of the gods found in the catacombs. Indeed, when we read the books regarding the Fellowship, there is mention of them entering the city via these tombs. And for reference, the Fellowship's ascension happened in 809, and at this time, the area would likely not have had the dungeons, which were later built by Rondon. As an aside, I do believe it was the Kingdom of Rondon who also built the mines that sit beneath the dungeons. After all, perhaps it was through their mining operations that they learned about the properties of the black, and how this site made people feel fear and hunger. Additionally, the mines could be part of their penitentiary system, forcing prisoners to work in the dangerous mines as part of their sentence. Either way, they are aware of the mines because they have built the dungeons around it. Given the lowest level of the dungeons, the catacombs has been built below the mines with a connecting staircase that bypasses the mines and connects to the main prison floor. The dungeons are described by a couple of characters to be an important nexus, and that is because it is an entrance to the otherworldly planes of Mahabri and the Void. The influence of the old gods is felt stronger here than most other places, making it an important cult site. By the time of the game in 1590, the Kingdom of Rondon ruled over this area, and transformed this location into the notorious Dungeons of Fear and Hunger. Even before the current calamity, they are dungeons with a really bad reputation, and this is something we learn from Sir Seymour, who says the following: "This place is used as a prison by the Kingdom of Rondon. Everyone knows these dungeons around these parts. They are pretty notorious, in fact. All kinds of rumours are exchanged in the darkness of the night. The rumours speak of unimaginable horrors. In part, these horrors are likely the result of the dungeon's location, due to the madness wrought by the god of the depths, but there are other human factors as to why the dungeons were so notorious, a lot of which were witnessed by the captain in charge of the dungeons, Captain Rudimer. Captain Rudimer kept a diary, and this diary is key in understanding the final few months before the dungeons fell to chaos. For anyone who isn't aware, Captain Rudimer is the man who would eventually become the dread Crow Mauler. This is a fact confirmed by dialogue from his friends in Lord Buckman's party, and because the Crow Mauler actually drops Rudimer's diary entry 3, which itself has Rudimer describing his disturbing crow dreams. But before he was this monster, he was the captain in charge of overseeing the dungeons, and he had a lot of difficulty in maintaining order and some decency here. Part of his problem was the inhuman treatment and torture that happened here, as we have Trorter present in the dungeons, a man who was once a heroic knight of Rondon, before he was maimed in battle and became a bitter torturer. In one of Rudimer's diary entries, he notes that he has had to stop Trorter from going too far in his methods. Even in this first entry, we can see that these dungeons were a place where morality would go to die. We will be looking at Rudimer's diary in detail throughout this video, as he is an eyewitness to the slow collapse of the dungeons. In general, he seems like a good man who was trying to keep everything together, as the dungeons descended into anarchy around him. One of the other facets that Rudimer needed to wrangle with is the cultists and dark priests who have taken up residence in the dungeons, and seemingly Rudimer needs to acquiesce to their increasingly depraved demands. Chapter 2 of his diary is an important one in order to understand the state of the dungeons, so I will read it out in full. It was a mistake to take this position in these dungeons. It's next to impossible to keep any kind of order among troops here. There are powers at play here that we as mere mortals cannot fight against. I've come to accept the madness. A naked prisoner crucified on a sacrificial statue with his guts hanging out. Just another day in the dungeons. More and more troops are committing every day. More food for those left. Orders to let some cultists do their wicked rituals here. Anything goes. All the gore and macabre scenery has become trivial to me. The High Priest demanded that we give them our prized prisoner, Lagarde of the Midnight Sun. I hesitated at first. After all, his worth in propaganda alone cannot be underestimated. But those priests somehow convinced higher-ups of their ways. Lagarde was transferred to the lower levels, below the mines. I have no idea what the purpose behind this is. Nothing good can come out of it, but orders are orders. So lots of interesting information here. Firstly, it does give us an idea of the timeline, with the capture of Lagarde taking place early on in 1590. We will then see that the third entry of his diary is dated August 1590, the time at which Captain Rudimer is about to become the Crow Mauler, a fate portended by the crows in his dreams. Indeed, there is a diary entry from one of the last surviving guards, called Diary of Unknown Guard, and it is dated as the 16th of August, 1590. In this, the guard details how he and the last few guards have fled into the mines for sanctuary. Apparently Captain Rudimer was among them, and he at some point traded with the cave dwellers for supplies. However, this guard states that Rudimer has fled into the darkness, only wearing his loincloth. So it was around the 16th of August that Rudimer transformed and the final guards died in the mines. Incidentally, this diary entry also explains how the cave dwellers got their hands on the Cube of the Depths. Ragnvaldr's expedition brought this item back from Vinland, before Lagarde slaughtered his tribe and stole it. It was then presumably confiscated off his person when he was brought to the dungeons, and then according to this diary entry, Rudimer traded the artifact to the cave dwellers for supplies. So we can assume the collapse of order in the dungeons happened around August or September of 1590, and our characters will likely have arrived shortly after that. Before we talk more about the final collapse of the dungeon, I want to return to the contents of Entry 2 of the Captain's Diary, as it is a good insight into the chaos that preceded the fall of the dungeon. It tells us that Rudimer recognises that there were greater forces at work here, that he sensed the condition of the dungeons was being warped by some unfathomable power. That power, of course, being the god of the depths. It is also interesting in that it tells us that Rudimer clearly has been ordered to comply with the dark priests who operate here. He essentially needs to hand over any prisoner they demand, and that they were free to perform their cult rites in the prison. He is even ordered to hand over Lagarde, who is taken deep below the main prison floor to the catacombs, his authority completely overridden by the high priest of this religion. This makes us think of the crucifixion we ourselves witness near the entrance to the dungeons, a rite overseen by the nearby dark priests. Let us talk about who these priests are and how they are able to wield such power. You see, while they may appear to be a cult, the dark priests are essentially the dominant religious body in the Western world. When you face them in-game, you can interrogate them on their beliefs. They will reveal that they revere and worship all the gods, the new gods, the old gods, and the ascended god all-mer. They are a cruel religion, and indeed this is something we can learn through Enki's life, who himself is a high priest of this religion. Part of his childhood training involved him fighting to the death with his sibling, where he was forced to kill her, and if not, he faced punishment by being thrown into a dark well. His story also ends with him gaining access to the grand libraries of Rondon, once again highlighting the prestige that those of the dark priesthood held in Rondon. Indeed, when we travel back in time via the Endless Dream sequence, we can see that the dark priests occupy the streets, just reinforcing that this is a religious body that openly has a lot of power within Rondon. So that explains how they are here, and how they are able to essentially turn the dungeons into a ritual site. But why are they here? Well, the Dark Priests here tell us themselves should we ask them. They say the following: the dungeons of fear and hunger, a nexus for different planes of existence. These dungeons are one of the last places where a man can still meet his creators. I am but a wretched being on a holy pilgrimage. All the priests of the Western world dream of delving down these dungeons. So that is why we have such a unique blend of people and factions within the dungeons of fear and hunger. There are the guards and prisoners who have been warped by the otherworldly powers at work. There are the eldritch beings that have been drawn here from the void, and Mahabre. And there are the cultists who have come here for religious purposes. All because the dungeons of fear and hunger are a nexus point between the planes of existence, a crossing over point between the real world and the world of the gods. So of course the influence of the otherworld and the old gods has likely been a massive contributing factor in the dungeon's otherworldly nature. It is easy to see how things spiraled out of control here, with the presence of the Dark Priests and Trotur's violent ways. The captain and his guards had a lot on their plate, yet it was the influence of the God of the Depths that caused the final collapse of order, as we will discuss shortly. It is this god who twisted the dungeon's inhabitants and even caused the captain to become the Crow Mauler. Rudimer was acutely aware that things were quickly degenerating within the dungeons, and as we saw from his rebuking of both Trotur and the cultists, he was a good man who was trying to keep everything together. This is reinforced by the new god's opinion on him, as they say the following when we ask about the Crow Mauler. He was set on purifying the dungeons from filth and depravity. Little did he know that he would become of the Black himself. We can see that he requested assistance from the Kingdom of Rondon and his allies, in order to aid him in locking things down here. One example of this is the Iron Shakespeare, a hulking suit of armour that stalks the basement level of the dungeons. Its origins become clear when we ask the new gods about it, and they say the following: as things started to succumb to chaos in the dungeons of fear and hunger, he was sent from the Kingdom of Rondon for aid. In short time, he too lost his mind. Now he tries to guard the area to his last breath from anyone who sets foot to the fortress. This suit of armour is actually empty, as evidenced by the interaction when you search its hollow body after defeating it. Either way, it has clearly also been corrupted by the darkness, and thus it also serves the dungeons. There is additional evidence to be found that the Rondon authorities were acutely aware of the situation within the dungeons. In Kahara's introduction, we learn that he has been hired as a mercenary to infiltrate the dungeons and rescue Lagarde, and that his employers are none other than kingdom officials. Whether this is an official request coming from the top, or as a faction within government, is never explained. However, it does show that people in positions of authority were aware of the situation, which does make sense as it was likely those same people who sent the Iron Shakespeare. But Rudimer also requested help via a less formal route, via his brother, the skilled knight Ser Cyril, aka the Gaunt Knight. The Gaunt Knight would gather some friends for an expedition to rescue his brother, and this band included Ser Cyril, Sir Seymour, Jean and Lord Buckman, the latter of which would act as the leader of this band. However, it seems that by the time the party arrived at the dungeons, things had already fallen apart, and they were split up, with Sir Seymour chased into the basement of the dungeons, and Buckman was trapped in the upper levels with Trotur. Jean and Cyril somehow made it to Mahabre, with Jean being maimed and captured by a Lord of Flies, and Sir Cyril lost his mind. If you do save all of them, they tell you that they had discovered the terrible truth of Rudimer's fate, that he had become the Crow Mauler, and with their mission failed, they escape the dungeons. Indeed, it does seem as though with Captain Rudimer's transformation that the dungeons completely fall, as he was the last bastion of order. As we discussed earlier, the diary of an unknown guard seems to document the last few days of the final surviving guards. those who fled into the mines for sanctuary. They are accompanied by their captain, but eventually Rudimer loses his mind and disappears into the darkness, before re-emerging as the Crow Mauler. His guards also fall victim to the dungeon's influence, with these being some of the earliest enemies we face in-game. Asking the new gods about the elite guards makes it clear that these grotesque monsters were once the proud knights of Rondon. There were many more guards at one point, but the rest of them seem to have ended up in the human Hydra, again a truth given to us by the new gods. For those who don't know, an act of love in this context is a reference to a Sylvian marriage, when one has intercourse on a ritual circle, invoking Sylvian's twisted love, and those partaking become melded with one another. In their desperation, the guards of the dungeons performed this ritual en masse, and became this abomination. And so the dungeons fell, a dark pit of otherworldly horror and violence. So what is happening here? Why are people changing? As soon as we enter the dungeons, we are told that the darkness engulfs us, and that our sanity starts to fade, and we are struck by an unnatural hunger. Throughout our entire journey, we get a sense of this invisible force pressing in on us, hounding us every step of the way. Captain Rudimer also senses this force, as he notes in his diary, and many of the monsters we face in the dungeons are those who have lost their sanity and been transformed by this darkness. We get repeated mention of a force known as the Black that is responsible for warping the life found within the dungeon. For example, should one mention brain flowers to the new gods, then they will say the following: "Just like how the Black changes the humans, it also affects the plants. On this soil that has seen countless death, that curious flower once started blooming. It requires fertile ground to grow to its full bloom, and there is no better source of life than humans. Given the fact that the God of the Depths is located in an area called the Altar of Darkness, it isn't hard to surmise that this Black is the influence of the God of the Depths. Indeed, when we are in the heart of darkness, the heart of the God of the Depths, our character is described as staring into the Black." However, we do get some direct confirmation via the new gods when we ask them about the greater mumblers, as they say the following: "Creations of the Black. Once a mumbler develops a consciousness, it can finally break free from the restraints of the God of the Depths. Or is it more like consciousness or enlightenment? It's hard to tell. These creatures don't function in the same way as humans do. No longer tied to be just a mindless servant of the god, no one knows their true ambitions. The Black, or the Darkness, is the warping power of the god that permeates the dungeons, and it is this same force that transformed Rudimer into the Crow Mauler. The Black is another word for the God of the Depths influence, the same force that drains our sanity and makes us feel an unnatural hunger. This Black will have been affecting Rudimer and his guards in the same manner, breaking their sanity over time, reducing them to the creatures we face in-game. One of the main spells associated with this god is Flock of Crows, a spell that is also used by the Crow Mauler, showing us that crows are also tied to this god. This basically explains what happened to Rudimer. Earlier we looked at the dialogue from the new gods who explain the Crow Mauler, that he was the guard captain who became one with the Black, and this means that he was transformed by the power of the God of the Depths. The captain became one with the Black, and he was reformed and warped by the Depths' influence into the fearsome Crow Mauler. In his diary, this fate is portended by his dreams in which he was seeing crows. What's interesting is there are suggestions that Rudimer is not the first Crow Mauler, as we can find a note that tells us about the myth of the Crow Mauler, as if this being is a well-known mythological character. There is even a crow statue found within the room that I take to be Rudimer's quarters. Whether this means there have been prior Crow Maulers, or Rudimer's knowledge of this myth merely influenced the form he took is up for debate. When we get the Crow Mauler's soul, its item description tells us that this is the condensed wrath of the Crow Mauler. I take this to mean that Rudimer's rage at the state of the dungeons, and his inability to control it overwhelmed him, and he now stalks the hall as an avatar of that rage. Indeed, this seems to be reinforced by the Captain's Diary 3, in which Rudimer documents his imminent transformation. Not only does he speak about the crows which plague his dreams, but he also speaks of his desire to purge the dungeons. This diary entry reads the following: "I know it better than any." Maybe I am the only sane one left to acknowledge this. Is it my responsibility to clean everything up once again? The crows. They give their testament to my suspicions. I will start the purge. I will root out the madness. Only I can do it. Rudimer's rage and desire to purge the dungeons is why he becomes the wrath-filled Mauler, yet no matter his intent, he instead becomes an instrument of the god of the depths. His connection to the god is so deep that we can once again encounter him within the gauntlet, within the deepest recesses of the god of the depths body. We know that this double-headed Crow Mauler is also Rudimer, because it will have the same limb wounds that you will have dealt before. For example, if you had already cut off the regular Mauler's arms, then this double-headed variant will also be missing both his arms. Additionally, this double-headed variant does actually drop Rudimer's Diary Entry 3 and the Crow emblem key, had you not got this key from killing the single-headed variant in the dungeon. As the new god said, Rudimer has truly become one with the Black. Rudimer is not the only being to be warped by the Black. As I noted earlier, the guards have been transformed by their lust and their violence. I see this as the god of the depths bringing out their base instincts, and their body changing to reflect this nature. Additionally, the Night Lurches also seem to have been prisoners who committed crimes against women, and so again, their form has been warped to reflect their depraved nature. You see, the Black seems to transform people into single-minded creatures. We just looked at the new god dialogue regarding the Greater Mumblers, which discusses how it is only after they free themselves that they gain enlightenment, that they are no longer mindless, as if the influence of the god of the depths reduces the intellectual capacity of the affected being, making them a simple-minded servant, bringing wrath, lust, fear, and loneliness to the forefront. This is why so many of the warped enemies we face, including the guards, have been reduced to the most primal of impulses. With this in mind, let us now look at the Cave Dwellers, the blue humanoid tribe found within the mines below the dungeon. They are a people who have built their society down here in the dark, and as a result they worship the nearby god of the depths, and it is they who maintain the altar of darkness. Yet their connection to the god of the depths goes even deeper than this, something we can learn from the new gods, who say the following of the Cave Dwellers: primal and savage beings. The poor souls were once stuck in the black because of a cave-in. So these were once people, presumably, who were trapped in the mines due to a cave-in, and so in time they learned to live down here. Yet because of the black they were reduced to a primal and savage form. They no longer wear clothes, they offer up blood sacrifices to their god, and they wield primitive weapons and tools. It is as if they are humans who have been pushed back to their Neanderthal roots, again the influence of the black suppressing intelligence and bringing one's primal aspect to the surface. Going by what the new gods have said, and the location of their village within the mines, my assumption is that the cave dwellers were once miners, and I also wonder if these beings were the ones who dug up and uncovered the god of the depths in the first place. The black is clearly in its most pure form within the god of the depths itself. That is why the gauntlet is the most frightening location we can visit. In here we find his insect servants, but also moonless guards. Guards who have performed a Sylvian marriage with a moonless wolf. The moonless wolves, as the name would suggest, are beings who live in caves and the deep places of the world, and thus the moonless guards likely feel an affinity to the god of the depths, and to me it makes sense that they have chosen to live within his very own body, nourished by the dark. In the heart of darkness we can even find the traces of gro-goroth himself, living within the black void. As for why we can find an aspect of an older god here, we can but speculate. Going from his dialogue, we can surmise that he no longer cares about humanity, or feels they are worthy of his presence, so perhaps what physical elements are left of him have been drawn to the black in order to be as far away from humanity as possible. Either way, I think the evidence we've looked at shows that the black is the dark influence of the God of the Depths, and its power is imposed upon the dungeons and all those who enter it. Now that we somewhat understand the effects that the black has on those within its sphere of influence, let us discuss the God of the Depths itself. One thing you will note is that the God of the Depths is not one that is as overtly worshipped by the peoples of the world. We find cults to gro-goroth and Sylvian. We witness sacrifices to all-mer, and we see statues for all three of these gods throughout the dungeons. There are plenty of books and documents which discuss and praise each of the gods, again reinforcing how familiar society is with the likes of gro-goroth and Sylvian. Yet there is no such celebration for the God of the Depths. We can't even pray to this god at the ritual circles. And this isn't because this god is forgotten, it's that this is its nature. It isn't known by those who live in the light. The only ones who become aware of this being's presence are those who live in darkness. It is in the darkness away from the lights of civilization that it reveals itself. Indeed, when we interact with the god's sigil found in the dungeon's basement, we can see that this god is described as a more obscure, older god. The dark priests are aware of this god, but they just don't know much about him. Again, because his influence is antithetical to any organised religion that one would find within civilization. Conversely, the yellow mages are aware of the God of the Depths, for they are able to cast one of its spells, Locust Swarm. This does make a bit of sense because they are the students of Nasra. Nasra, while mainly teaching his students the spells of gro-goroth, also taught them more generally about the occult and the old gods. This is evident in the book called Blood and Flower Magic, in which a student details some of the expansive knowledge Nasra passed on to them. Indeed, the second secret of gro-goroth, listed in this book, seems to be a direct reference to mastery over insects. But the yellow mages are very specialised, being tutored by a new god directly, and thus it makes sense that they would have some niche knowledge of the obscure God of the Depths. It is clear that Ragnvaldr has had more experience of the dark things of the world than others, given he and his people travelled to Vinland, and according to him, he saw evil there that is of the same nature found in the dungeon. Additionally, his people found the Cube of the Depths there, a man-made object that has an affinity to the God of the Depth. We also know that bestial tribes, to which Rancid the Sergal belongs to, live in Vinland. I would therefore conclude that tribes that live within Vinland have a close connection to the god, hence they were able to produce the Cube of the Depths. Ragnvaldr is one of the few individuals who is seemingly aware of this god and its nature, as when we meet him in the thicket, he tells us that this god is worshipped by those who are forsaken and forgotten. This is why the terms darkness and black are so often associated with this god. It represents the dark, deep and hidden things of this world, yet its power is so strong in the dungeons that we can actually find its symbol carved into the ground of the basement, a symbol that few have likely seen. And just to confirm, we know that this is its sigil, because it also appears on the hexen table in relation to the God of the Depths powers. Enki is the only character who can have a prior connection to the God of the Depths, learning mastery over insects during his time in the bottom of a dark well, a place we would fully expect its influence to reach. Earlier we spoke about the Gauntlet and the Heart of Darkness, the regions that exist within the body of the God of the Depths, thus the area that is most associated with his power. Another interesting creature that is found within the Gauntlet is the Lizard Mage, and the new gods tell us why it is down here. They say the following: an act of love between a lizardman and a yellow mage. The being that came from the act seems to share the intelligence of both worlds. However, it does not know for certain which tribe it truly belongs to, thus it wanders the darkness alone. This reinforces the idea that the god of the depths is associated with the Forsaken, those who have no place in regular society. That is why this mage and the moonless guards are found here, two twisted beings who belong nowhere else. In short, this god is the god of the unknown, of the dark, and of the lonely forsaken creatures of the world. The creatures that are most clearly associated with the god of the depths are insects. Most of the spells associated with this god are to do with insects, including the ability to speak to them. And it makes sense because insects are the most forsaken of all beings. Whether insects are born from the god or they just have a natural affinity to it is unclear. But what is clear is that these insects are deeply connected to the god, given the only way you can actually raise your affinity with the god of the depths is by assisting the cockroach king, as if serving the god's servants brings one closer to the black and its power. Insects, unlike some of the god's other servants, seem to be reasonably intelligent, being able to communicate as effectively as any human. I do want to shout out a really excellent video here by the creator Ratat, which covers the insects in the world of fear and hunger, and I would highly recommend it if you would like a deep dive on the subject. And Ratat's analysis was heavily influential on my understanding of the relevance of insects, and so I will be citing him a couple of times. In this video, Ratat unpacks the relevance of the scarabs, the insectoid creatures you can find in present Mahabre. We know that these creatures count as insects, because we are able to commune with them using mastery over insects. Even able to make peace with them, Ratat then highlights the new god's dialogue regarding scarabs, in which they say the following: "Men are wicked." Condensed wickedness can manifest in many ways. Scarabs are there to remind us of this. One of the overarching points that Ratat makes in his video is the thematic connection between insects and humans, and that this is further proof of this overlap, the point of this being to highlight the fact that if insects are forsaken, then so too is humanity, and thus humanity is a species that the god of the depths is interested in. This definitely makes sense, given that humankind has been forsaken by the older gods at large. Gro-goroth is no longer interested in humanity, Rare the moon god hates us, and Sylvian's love for us has become twisted. Perhaps this is why the god of the depths is not only interested in insects, but with humanity. As we will discuss in the latter part of this video, Ratat, in his video on insects, suggests that Depths willingly allows himself to be killed and reborn as the god of fear and hunger, a god which repackages his domain into something that is more relevant and relatable to humankind. Perhaps we could see this as his interest in humanity, akin to his interest in insects. And there is a reason that his insectoid children are so prevalent within the dungeons, and that is because the dungeon is essentially an extension of the god of the depths' body. We can find its mouth within the Altar of Darkness, but it becomes clear that its body extends all throughout the dungeon. When we speak to Ragnvaldr about the god of the depths, he tells us that these dungeons are akin to the intestines of the god, and in a separate dialogue he goes further stating that it is Depths who formed these dungeons. In an older version of the game, there was a mechanic in which the player would have been able to sacrifice someone to the god of the depths, which would result in the dungeon layout being changed. Further evidence that the dungeons are meant to be interpreted as the god of the depths' innards. While Rondon may have physically built the bricks and mortar of the dungeons, its labyrinthian innards are part of the god now, ever-changing, dark, and endless. Incidentally, this is why I believe that the Gauntlet, a location that is meant to be the organic interior of the god, looks closer to a man-made dungeon. The god of the depths has co-opted the dungeons as part of its anatomy, and it is able to reform its interior to challenge those who enter. The Gauntlet is just a more stark example of this. The god of the depths has purposefully made his innards take this form. One final dangerous challenge for those who wish to have audience with the heart of darkness. This is why those who are present in the dungeons are so affected by the god's influence. They are literally residing inside of the god's body, and while we can accept that the dungeons in totality are an extension of the god of the depths in a sort of metaphysical way, we can actually see the god's physical anatomy in various locations. When we enter the gauntlet, the direct innards of depths, we can see a sort of grey scale that is used as the flooring in here, and I see this material as the god's internal skin, or flesh. We do also see this grey flesh of the god outside of the gauntlet. In the areas we also find its hearts. We see a fair amount in the catacombs in the thicket. We actually see some of it popping up in present-day Mahabre. Unlike Rare, who hates humanity, and the other old gods who have abandoned humans, the god of the depths is still here, and there is evidence that he has tried to form connections with humanity. For example, we have the thicket, which, as you can clearly see, seems to be birthed from a woman, who now sits at the top of the tree, and we can learn about this via a party dialogue with Ragnvaldr, in which he says the following of the tree that sits atop the thicket. It's the Maiden of the Depths, the human bride of the god that formed these dungeons. The two could never truly be together, being a mere human being and an elder god, but desperately the maiden still tries to link the human world with the world of the gods to this day. So it seems as though the maiden is the woman we can see at the centre of the tree, and from her has grown the thicket that links the surface to the deepest depths of the dungeons. What's interesting is that Ragnvaldr states that the maiden is trying to link the human world to that of the old gods, and that is what she has achieved via the thicket, given it is a path that leads from the surface world of the humans down to the world of Mahabre and the old gods. Given this woman has been transformed in such a manner, we can once again assume that the god of the depths is responsible, and thus we could see the thicket and the creatures found within it to be the offspring of this maiden and the old god, a direct connection made by the god of the depths to humankind. As an aside, there is an unused book that never made it to the game, Captain's Diary 4, and in this the captain notes how he knows that the tree is dangerous, and is somehow linked to the darkness of the dungeon. He states that it is for this reason he has sealed it off, and thus we can get some kind of explanation as to why access to the tree has been blocked off. There is definitely a nurturing aspect to the god of the depths, and this is self-evident with the way in which this god is still physically present in the world, and willing to influence and interact with those who exist in the dark. The cave dwellers live in close proximity to the old god, and while he has changed them, he technically hasn't harmed them. We also know that they largely eat cave moss, a plant that grows exclusively in dark places. They grow within the dungeon, and so we could see this as the god providing nourishment and sanctuary to the cave dwellers. Ratat, in his insect video, suggests that the dungeons are analogous to the god of the depths' own carcass, his rotting and dying body, his cadaver into which the god has willingly invited insects into, a place they can grow, multiply, and feed. There is one final thing I want to talk about, and it doesn't really fit into any other section, and that is the heart of darkness itself. This is of course the heart of the god of the depths, in which the power of the black is at its most concentrated. We discussed already that the traces of gro-goroth have been drawn here for some reason. It is also where the girl will undergo her transformation into the god of fear and hunger. This of course makes sense given an aspect of this old god will become one with her and trigger the transformation, and given we are at its very heart, it makes sense that this is the location that this needs to happen in. But I do wonder why there is this mound of bodies here found in the heart. A pile of bodies that also looks like a hydra. Perhaps these are bodies of those sacrificed by the cave dwellers, and then tossed into the old god's mouth. We could also theorize that these bodies are those who have died within the dungeons, and that they have slowly been drawn into the darkness as part of its digestive process. Either way, it is clear that the Heart of Darkness is dense with the power of the God of the Depths. So that is what the God of the Depths is. A being who is still physically present in the real world, whose body is and extends throughout the dungeons. It is a god of the unknown, the dark and forsaken. Hence its followers are those who live in the dark and deep places of the world. Yet this old god stands at a critical juncture, with a massive transformation about to happen that will change the god and the world forever. One thing we need to consider is, why is all of this happening now? Presumably the dungeons have existed in Rondon for some time, so why is this just taking place in 1590? Again, these dungeons have had a bad reputation for some time, and I can imagine that people here will have felt the oppressive presence of the old god. Yet in 1590 it seems as though everything was kicked into high gear, resulting in the chaotic situation we bear witness to throughout the events of the game. The reason all this is happening now is because this is an important moment, a moment in which everything is about to change. In Fear and Hunger 2, we later learn that the events of the first game become the start of a new age, showing how truly important they are. The collapse of the dungeon and the ascension of the god of fear and hunger happens in 1590, because various factors all coalesce at the same time. The first factor is the waning power of the current new gods. When we go to Pas Mahabre, we see the Fellowship at the peak of their powers, and the aesthetics of Pas Mahabre reflect this, as we see the city bathed in a golden light. Yet in the present day, all of the new gods are very defeated, and their power has faded, and Mahabre's darkness in the present represents their waning power and influence. Indeed, we could even see the darkness in the city as the influence of the god of the depths, spreading and overtaking the city of the gods itself, with the new gods too weak to do anything about it. Indeed, you will note that in the past, the Golden Temple was unblemished, yet in the present we can see the grey-scale flesh of the god of the depths beginning to take it over, and one of its very hearts has even supplanted the golden throne itself. Very clear evidence of the god's growing influence over the city. After all, it is in present-day Mahabre where the scarabs hold dominion, the servants of the god of the depths. The next factor in why this is happening now is the birth of the girl who will become the god of fear and hunger. If we ask the new gods about the Ancient One, they will say the following: a soul that radiates the light of an older god. The soul has formed itself inside the body of a little girl. The mother of the Ancient One is the Endless One, and the father is the man from the prophecies. The results of such unholy union are unfamiliar to us. This girl is so important because she was born of Nilvan, a new god and Lagarde, a man who has been prophesied. As for when this union happened, we cannot know, but I presume that Nilvan came to Lagarde several years ago, and going by a book found in the second game, it seems as though she came to him in a dream, much as she does to us when we sleep in the Tower of the Endless. This union between New God and Chosen One has resulted in a special child being born, a human body, but a soul of an old god within her. Given that she comes to embody fear and hunger, the chief aspects of the dungeons themselves, I would suggest that she was born here, and has only known the cruel darkness of the dungeons. Indeed, this is somewhat confirmed in the second game, where in a book by Enki on the god of fear and hunger, he states that this girl was a blank slate born in the darkest pits, and that was where she grew, and it was all she knew. Her miserable life in the dungeons has provided her with the experience she needs to represent fear and hunger. Finally, Lagarde himself has been brought to the dungeons, and he is a key player in kickstarting the events. Not only did he bring the Cube of the Depths here, but his presence is what drew the four main characters here. These four characters are pivotal agents of change, and the girl would not have reached her necessary destination without their assistance. So in short, everything is happening now because all the pieces are in place. Destiny calls, and the cogs of fear and hunger are about to turn. A new era is about to begin. This seems to have been a scheme cooked up by Nilvan, a new god of the Fellowship, who realised that new gods were only a stopgap solution, and for humanity to truly advance, we needed a god on the level of the old gods. And so she birthed her child, and asked us to take the girl to the heart of darkness, the core of the god of the depths himself. To do this, we must kill it by destroying its 3 hearts, which also allows passage through its open mouth into the heart of darkness. Yet while this current physical form of the god of the depths may die in 1590, the god will continue to exist in a new form. This is well documented in a couple of books found in Fear and Hunger 2, including one written by Enki himself, who of course witnessed these events firsthand. In the Skin Bible for the God of Fear and Hunger, he says the following: "The forgotten and long dormant god of the depths perished that night. Only an older god never truly perishes. In its stead, the god of fear and hunger planted its roots and started to grow her influence on the surface world. The scheming false deity had hoped her daughter would be the light of mankind. Only true darkness does not breed light. The god of fear and hunger was a pure child, a blank slate birthed in the darkest pits of human creation. That is where she grew. That is all she knew. She was the pure representation of fear and hunger, not spoiled by even a glimmer of hope." This is further elaborated on by another book by Father Donovan, called the God Manifesto, which says, "Words about the death of an older god especially are nothing short of absurd. How do you kill an idea, an inspiration, or one of the primordial concepts once it is conceived? The thought will forever haunt your mind as long as our consciousness is there to remind us of it. Once an older god is born, it has existed forever. A god, like a human soul, is not constrained by linear time and space. It can reincarnate multiple times within our history and future history without us knowing any better. They spawn from the green stream, but which spawns first, an older god in its physical form, or the concept our consciousness gave birth to? These two together confirm the fate of the god of the depths, that an aspect of it reincarnated within the god of fear and hunger. It is an ascended god, born of a human, yet possessing the soul of an old god, that of the god of the depths. This of course makes sense given everything we have discussed. The girl was born of a special union of 2 important parents, but in many ways she had another father. In my eyes, her true father is the god of the depths, whose body she has inhabited since she was born. The god of the depths has reincarnated as part of a new ascended god, with what he represents changing in the process. The new ascended god represents fear and hunger, the feelings and emotions the girl felt since she was born, and she felt these things because of the god of the depths' influence. He cultivated the girl, he moulded her to be a being of fear and hunger, and in many ways he is as responsible, if not more, for what she would become than even Nilvan. With that in mind, Ratat makes an excellent observation in his insect video, and so again full credit to him for the point I'm about to make. In the Gauntlet, the innards of the god of the depths, we can find many insects who can speak to us if you have mastery over insects. These insects speak of an upcoming celebration, that we are close to a jubilee. Bear in mind this is after we have killed the god itself, in order to gain access via its mouth, and yet they are celebrating this moment. This suggests that they are aware that their master is not truly dead, rather he is about to transform. If Depth's servants, insects, are aware of this transformation, then surely the god himself is aware as well. As I have said, it is as if the god of the depths is the girl's surrogate father, moulding her to be the perfect vessel, sheltering her as she grew up within his very bosom. The god of the depths hasn't been used by Nilvan in her scheme, Rather, he has used her for his own ascension. There is a recurring point made by the two games that the new gods are nothing more than puppets of the old gods, despite the former believing they have supplanted the latter. In the God Manifesto, Father Donovan Hugo says this of the new gods: "The mockery that is the new gods, the puppets yearning to become the puppeteers, should never be mistaken with the gods that dwell beyond our understanding. They are but byproducts of the immense influence the older gods hold on us. Just by flying too close to the sun, or why not moon, and one can attain a glimpse of the true intensity that is older gods." Taking all of this together, I conclude that the God of the Depths willingly embraced his death and rebirth, becoming part of the God of Fear and Hunger deliberately. Nilvan believed that this was her plan to supplant the old gods, and yet she is just another puppet, used by the God of the Depths to further his own agenda. This transformation is very fortuitous for the God of the Depths, because by the time of Fear and Hunger 2, almost 400 years later, he goes from being one of the most obscure gods in the pantheon to his new form being the most prominent god of the modern era, as one could say that the God of Fear and Hunger rivals all-mer himself in terms of influence. Enki documents the influence that the God of Fear and Hunger had over the human world in his Skin Bible, where he says, "Mankind had seen its share of stagnation and suffering up to that point. To rise from those perilous pits, growing pains were necessary. Progress comes at a price. Fear motivated people while hunger kept them moving forward. People cherished hardship and drew inspiration from it. They learned from it. What followed was advancement that mankind had not seen since the Forgotten Ages. The dark fumes that rise from pipes of modern cities are direct consequences of this era, an era that came to be known as the Cruel Age. This new god's emergence was a powerful factor in pushing humanity forward from the medieval era to the modern one that we see in Fear and Hunger 2. The God of the Depths certainly saw a glow-up, and was able to repackage his domain into a new form that was more easily relatable to humanity. You see, in a lot of ways, the God of Fear and Hunger is a derivation of the God of the Depths. He was the unknowable darkness of the forsaken and forgotten parts of the world. The God of Fear and Hunger is the human understanding or reaction to such concepts, born of a little girl who is at the mercy of the God of the Depths' primordial form. In transforming his concepts, he is now recognized and relevant to the human experience. So that's it, folks. That is my take on the God of the Depths and the Dungeons of Fear and Hunger. This is a video I have wanted to make for a long time, as I find the location of the first game to be a fascinating setting, and of course one cannot talk about the dungeons without talking about the God of the Depths. In the future, I will likely want to tackle the old gods as a whole, and talk about their nature and relationship to humanity. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below. What are your thoughts on this mysterious god? And again, if you are new here, then consider liking and subscribing. But until next time, folks, I will see you in the Dungeons of Fear and Hunger. Take care and have a wonderful evening.